this video is in response to Mayapple's video, Secular Music Does the Work of God. It's a good thing. I want to start off by saying that you may have a point with the Christians. Maybe they should become a little bit more familiar with secular music for educational purposes, or maybe providing them an avenue to connect with a non-believer. However, I don't think secular music does the work of God. And I don't think it doesn't do the work of God either through neutrality, not attributing the credit, I guess you could say, to God, or by direct opposition. Within secular music and how it relates to God, I think you can classify them in two groups. Neutral songs, and they would be secular songs that may deal with solely a breakup and how that feels. And that's not in direct opposition with God, because it does happen to everyone. But then you have opposing songs, opposition songs. An example of that would be Marilyn Manson. He's anti-God, pro-drug, and transgender, among other things, directly against God. Another type of opposing song, maybe a song doesn't mention God, not against God, but will glorify something he's against, such as fornication. The only way I can see secular music overall helping God may be that in those secular songs that deal with despair and loss, it may help God with his believers, because it's going to reinforce to the believers a life without God and what that entails. On the flip side of that, I don't know too much about Christian music, but if your assessment's right, if most of it's positive, maybe it shouldn't be. I think of stories such as Job, or Lazarus and the rich man, especially Job, who was loyal and faithful to God, and yet still encountered significant loss. Even if it was for a brief time, those losses were significant. And maybe if the Christian music, if it talked about some suffering that they went through, or that they've gone through here in life, even when they were with God, maybe that could be a connection point with some non-believers. Instead of focusing so much on the message and focusing so much on the great ending that it's going to have, keeping it a little bit more realistic, a connection with the non-believer in going through some common distressing times, breakups, whatever. He's talked about Christians maybe when they're dealing with the unbeliever, or if they can identify the themes and the despair, instead of going right in with the message of God, maybe they could start off by helping the person with their problems and basically being more subtle. And I agree with that, but the message, sooner or later, the message needs to be brought in. It needs to be brought in, and it has to be fairly soon. Because with the Christian doctrine, the non-believer's biggest problem, most fundamental problem, is they don't have God. And that's going to impact their life, and certainly the afterlife. Moving on, and so basically, and I think you're maybe over being too general here with concerning secular music. You're basically saying that it does God's work because it's so full of despair and negativity that it shows what life is like without God. Two problems with that. Number one problem is there are a significant number of secular songs that are not negative. They're not full of despair. They are happy songs. They are feel-good songs. Everything's going great. So maybe I think you need to be a little bit careful with that. And those songs actually, again, they can be neutral, but they can also be opposing to God in that they're showing a possible happiness without Him. Which leads to my next point. it is possible, maybe not that likely, maybe not that probable, to live your life pretty much happy and without God. Now you might need some luck with that. You might need a good childhood to get you started. So you're emotionally stable, you have a good self-esteem, and you have a clear mind. But certainly it's possible. The other problem with you basically deducing that because the bulk, and I'm not so sure the ratio on that, but let's just assume you're right, that the bulk of secular music is negative and despair, and that shows that's doing wonders for God. The only other problem with that is the non-believer, if they're agnostic or whatever, the atheist, whoever, they're going to have to attribute that negative and their despair and their loss. They're going to have to attribute that to their lack of connection with God versus attributing it to something else. Human nature, bad luck, chance, another religion, whatever. So again, that's the only problems I see with that. But in conclusion, I don't think secular music, I'm going to tell you overall, in most cases, I don't think it does the work of God. Because anything that omits God, or anything that's directly opposing to God, cannot do His work and cannot be a good thing